Good day, everyone. My name is Christopher Emanaka. This is History 101. We will be discussing pandemics, not just because we're experiencing a pandemic right now. We will talk about both old and new pandemics, like some pandemics that occurred in history. At the moment, we're actually experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic. But throughout this slideshow, we'll be discussing about the bubonic plague, Black Death, which is another name for bubonic plague. We'll talk about the Spanish flu and many others. So this is my title page. It's displaying History Final Part 2. And without further ado, let's get into this. On the first slide, we have what is a pandemic? A pandemic is known as a widespread disease resulting from new virus strains or subtypes that are easily transmitted between people. A bacteria that is resistant to antibiotics or when novel diseases acquire the potential to rapidly spread. So in other words, basically a pandemic is like a disease that spreads from one country to the next country to the next country. It just means like a disease that's hard to control, that's spreading throughout the whole world. Just like the COVID-19 that we experience now. It started in Wuhan, China, but eventually found its way from individual to individual, spanning across the whole globe. So it's affecting everybody right now. So yeah. Where pandemics emerge from? This is a question that people may tend to ask. Pandemics mainly emerge through animals, and birds spread pandemics to the people. This could be caused by a shift in the antigens. Major disease outbreaks continue to pose huge threats to public health with severe economic repercussion. So basically, it usually starts in a host, which is normally like an animal. And through consumption or contact, human beings can end up getting that disease that scientists know almost nothing about. So from there, it gets passed from human being to human being through interaction. It can be through saliva, it can be through coughing or sneezing. So basically we spread it around the world, which makes it a pandemic as it gets passed around from human being to human being interaction. There are quite a few pandemics that eventually occurred in the history of the world. Some of the world's most worst plagues in history include Spanish flu. That one happened from 1918 to 1920. Flu pandemic. That one happened from 1889 to 1890. We have the Black Death, another name for that is bubonic plague. That occurred from 1346 to 1353. And then we have AIDS, swine flu, Ebola, and the current COVID-19 that we're experiencing now. Hopefully, COVID-19 will soon, go away. On the next slide, we have political, economic, and environmental structures that pave the way for pandemics. The spread of infectious diseases and the reemergence of the known epidemics or pandemics has been associated with environmental factors such as temperature, precipitation, soil types, altitudes, and socioeconomic factors like poverty rates, gross domestic product, population density, agriculture, and agricultural processes. Human beings live at a time when they are likely to see more infectious epidemics or pandemics than ever before, some of which are completely unexpected. So basically these are just like some factors that can bring about pandemics and why it can happen or occur in this day and age. Okay, so we have what is called the bubonic plague. That was one of the worst plagues or pandemics that ever occurred in history. The bubonic plague, also known as Black Death, was a communicable disease caused by Bacterium Yersinia pestis that peaked in Europe between 1346 and 1353. The apocalyptic pandemic devastated Europe, leaving half of the population dead. And yes, I said half the population. You're probably wondering, how did it emerge? The Black Death emerged from diseases from the fleas on black rats traveling on merchant ships. The devastating global epidemic, or yesterday it turned into a pandemic, attacked Asia and Europe from the early 1300s. The victims had 50% chance of death. The plague attacked the lungs and had a mortality rate of 90%. This definitely had to be the worst plagues in history. It even makes COVID-19 look less intense than it is. On this next slide, we have more on bubonic plague, also known as Black Death. The Black Death is among the most destructive and extensive pandemic in human history. It reached Crimea in 1346 and later spread to Europe and the Mediterranean. Most victims succumbed within 3 to 7 days after getting infected. The victims suffered pain, fever, swollen lymph nodes, boils, and blotched skin. The pandemic was terrifying, and a mere contact led to an infection, followed by instantaneous deaths. The panic led to closure of hospitals, religious places, and shops. So this plague was very, very deadly and very easily communicable from one person to another, making this pandemic start and wipe out a lot of individuals. Next slide is our capitalist way of life, biologically sustainable. Capitalist globalization is not biologically sustainable unless people accept a permanent triage of humanity. The economic globalization that has accelerated the free flow of investment and finance in the world market has adverse impacts. It has broken down conventional borders between animals and people, increased the power to drug syndicates, proliferated carcinogenic trash, destroyed the traditional communities, and turned oceans into sewers. So these are the effects. Okay, so pandemics. This is just pretty much like a little bit more info on pandemics. So let me get started. Pandemics are known to cause huge political, social, and economic disruptions. There is an increased outbreak of pandemics due to the increased urbanization, globalization, global travels, and integration and changes in the natural environment. Therefore, the history of pandemics should teach human beings to stop interpreting pandemics without a moral model. There's a need for a unified response to pandemics rather than diverse, disconnected approaches. Therefore, to respond to the current epidemic or pandemic challenges facing the world, people need to understand, predict, prevent, respond, and mitigate environmental and socio-economic factors that are likely to threaten human lives. Okay, so thank you for your cooperation. Thank you for the audience. And I hope you guys learned a thing or two from what I've been saying. And hopefully, with the current situation occurring now, it will all end well. and we'll be back to normal in no time. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.